The Daily Code Snippet. Client-side form validation is a way that the contents of a form can be examined to prevent errors from being sent to the server. Validation also prevents malicious actors from trying to take advantage of form inputs. In the past, JavaScript was required, which is beyond the scope of these videos. But with HTML5, there is now some built-in validation that does not require JavaScript. Although for more complex validation, you will still need to understand and use JavaScript to execute. Although we have discussed how several of the input types create buttons, there is also a button element. Let's review some of the types of buttons you can create using the input element. In the following code, you will see a demo of an image button, a reset button, and a submit button. We are also showing you the use of the disabled attribute, which will turn off the button. The input element is an empty element. To watch the full video, click the link to YouTube. Presented by Designers Learn Code.